Number 1.
Most cold cases have at least a slim chance of being solved due to having a source of DNA evidence to match or the murder weapon found. However, the possibilities for a particular cold case to get solved get that much harder when there is no known motive, no persons of interest or suspects named or murder weapon discovered. What if the only key to closing the case was a tiny piece of DNA evidence, of which a match has yet to be established? That's the current reality for one particular cold case involving the double murders of two best friends and co-workers in 1993, at their place of work, a video store. This case, the West Coast video store murders, hopefully, will one day get the closure it deserves. Seann Campbell and Bryan Bensen were best friends who grew up together in Warminster, Pennsylvania. In 1993, both were 20 years old and worked part-time at their local West Coast video store in the Rosemore Shopping Center on County Line Road. However, both men would meet an unfortunate, abrupt end one fateful night that, to this day, no one knows who is responsible for or why it happened at all. Neither Seann nor Bryan had kept any secrets from their loved ones. Both of them attended the same high school and shared mutual friends. Each lived with their respective parents within walking distance from the video store. At the time of their murders, Bryan was attending Bucks County Community College, in addition to his part-time job at the video store, and Seann also worked full-time at Sylvan's Pools in Abington. Moreover, Seann had been working at the video store for up to 6 years by that point, while Bryan, sadly, had only begun working there 6 months earlier. Within their last few hours, Seann and Bryan tended to several customers, including Bryan's father Gary, who had stopped by the store around 9 p.m. to pick up some movies. By his account, nothing appeared out of the ordinary, and so there was no reason for him to stay longer than he did, according to his wife. On the night of November 10, 1993, both Seann and Bryan were in the process of closing up the store for the night. Shortly before 10 p.m., both entered the adult X-rated room where they both got fatally stabbed, with long-bladed knives, into their necks, backs, and chests. Since both Seann and Bryan were at least 6 feet tall and physically fit, investigators firmly believe that there was more than one assailant, with the notion that there had to have been two. Despite being stabbed repeatedly, both put up a good fight, as evidenced by the defensive wounds on each of their forearms during the autopsies. Though the motive was initially suggested to be robbery, the fact that the assailant or assailants only took $300, not including any of the cash in the register or either victims' wallets, has cast doubt on this. Moreover, police suggest that either the assailants hid in the adult X-rated room of the store before attacking them, or that both men were lured there by some form of force. It is unclear which one of these two scenarios did occur. Unfortunately, no one discovered their bodies until the owner of the store did the next morning, which, by then, was too late. Police at the scene found neither any signs of forced entry or a murder weapon. Additionally, they discovered that the front door had been left both unlocked and ajar. Furthermore, detectives discovered that someone had cut the wire to a security camera aimed at the cash register. Even more frustratingly, investigators quickly determined that cutting the cord to that security camera would not have made a difference at all, since the security camera was not working at the time. The reason for this was because the security camera did not activate until after the store was locked, police said. Though the police concluded that two assailants responsible, trying to identify them proved challenging. Interestingly, the one clue they did find was a gold half-inch fake diamond stud earring which they found on the floor between the bodies. It had ripped off during the ensuing fight between one of the boys and their assailants. Subsequently, DNA was collected from the earring in the form of tissue and blood. However, despite the DNA obtained from the stud, any matches from it have yet to be found. 2 years after the murders, according to a 1997 news account, a jailhouse snitch named John Hall started calling Seann's family from prison. He made claims that a fellow inmate serving a life sentence confessed to the double murders. However, investigators were able to determine that his allegations were frustratingly made up quickly. Additionally, that same year, a partially rusted knife was found behind the Rosemore shopping center. Although the police had the blade tested, it did not yield any evidence. The murders left both families and their community reeling from the double tragedy. As a result, they raised $52,000 for information leading to the arrests of those responsible. However, the case remains unsolved to this day, and the identities of those responsible remain unknown. Over 20 years later, while both families have moved on as best as they could from their tragedies, they remain haunted by their losses whenever they encounter new people, or when new neighbors move into the neighborhood and ask about their remaining kids. Honestly, I cannot even begin to imagine being in that position. To have lost a loved one, your child no less, in such an unexpected, senseless and violent matter, where you still have no answers as to who killed them, or why, and probably will never get any. Besides, having to decide on whether even to tell the people you just met about what happened to them, or not when asked, both to avoid the awkward reactions or painful reminders is hard enough. Moreover, they are no longer confident that the murders of their respective loved ones will ever get solved, and at least somewhat made peace with that. Despite that, both families still deserve at least some answers. Hopefully, Seann and Bryan both get justice one day soon. If anyone out there knows even the tiniest, seemingly insignificant clue to who killed Seann and Bryan, or why, please contact Warminster Police Department at 215 443 5000.
Number 2.
On December 10, 2000, Joshua Lee Walden's brother was playing with friends in the woods on Missionary Ridge near his family's Chattanooga home when they made a grim discovery. Josh's 17-year-old sister had reported the 10-year-old boy missing the day before, and the East Lake family was searching for Josh with friends, family, and police. Then his brother and his friends found a body covered in leaves near East Lake Park. Anybody who knows anything, please come forward. Bring my baby's killer to justice. You never heal. The pain, the suffering, the emptiness, it never goes away, Josh's mother Ann Walden said in 2001. Anyone with information is asked to call the Chattanooga Police Department's Cold Case Unit at 423-209-7470, to send an email to coldcases@hcdatn.org. Josh was last seen riding his 20-inch Magnum bicycle, which he had painted a dull red, Friday, December 8, 2000 in the 4500 block of 14th Avenue, near his family home. When he disappeared, Josh was reportedly wearing a red shirt and black jeans. Around midnight, Saturday, December 9, 2000, his sister's 17-year-old sister Crystal reported him missing. Police immediately started a neighborhood canvass and interviewing friends and family. Investigators at first were curious why it took so long for the boy to be reported missing. I don't know what the answer is. They apparently have a loose supervision style with their kids, former CPD spokesman Ed Buse said in 2000. CPD Detective Mike Mathis said the family was extremely helpful in investigating the case. As more than a dozen police officers were tracking Josh's movements, his brother was exploring western slope of Missionary Ridge with some friends. The children were playing in a wooded area off 16th Avenue in Chattanooga, about half a mile from the Walden's home, when they came above a pile of leaves in a depression. The leaves obscured Josh from view, and thankfully his brother didn't look at his face. It scared him, and he ran off the hill, Josh's father Johnny Walden said in a December 12, 2000, interview. The autopsy found superficial abrasions on Josh's nose and the right side of his face. There were no major abrasions, and no signs of sexual assault. The medical examiner determined that Josh was suffocated, likely from someone compressing his chest or stomach to restrict airflow. Investigators emphasize that he wasn't strangled. Was it intentional? Until we can get to the bottom of it, we can't say 100%, Marques said in 2004. But we do think there's an aspect that this may not have been intentional. Josh's red bicycle was never found. At the time of the initial investigation, Chattanooga police scoured the community for clues and only turned up a few things of interest. First, detectives discovered Josh never took off his shoes, not even when he went to bed. He was so fanatical about it his parents would wait until he was sound asleep to take them off, and when woke up Josh would be mad to find his shoes removed. But when his remains were found his feet were bare, no socks or shoes on him, or even near the body. Then Chattanooga police asked the FBI for assistance. A report by FBI analysts at the National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crimes surmised the killer came from the immediate neighborhood. They determined this because of where Josh's remains were found, and that it appeared as if the perpetrator attempted to obscure his identity. 1 year after he was discovered, investigators told Josh's family and the media his killer doused his body in muriatic acid, which was found on and under the body as well as the ground around him. By using the acid, Josh appeared to have been burned. But instead of hiding evidence, the acid preserved the remains and kept animals from disturbing the scene. The acid is commonly available at hardware stores and is used to clean concrete and metal in construction projects and mechanics shops. Detectives checked with the FBI at the time for similar cases and found nothing to indict a serial offender. According to the FBI profile, the perpetrator disposed of Josh because he was under stress and retreated to somewhere familiar. In other words, the offender was comfortable in the neighborhood, thus that the offender lives or has spent considerable time in the neighborhood, the report said in a Chattanigan.com report from 2001. The report also said the perpetrator probably used the muriatic acid because they were familiar with it or has ready access to it. The offender does not kill the victim and then purchase acid. He uses what is readily available to him and what he is comfortable handling. The perpetrator also likely had contact with Josh beforehand, the profile said. It even said investigators probably had contact with the offender during the course of the initial investigations. Despite these clues, the case soon went cold, and the Waldens have wondered for 20 years what happened to Josh. The Hamilton County District Attorney's Cold Case Unit is again called in the FBI and asking the public for help. They started with a video of Crystal Walden. "That's all I need is just closure," Crystal Walden said in a video released in February 2020. "If it was an accident, I mean, it was an accident. They didn't mean to do it. They didn't mean to hurt him. They panicked and, you know, people panic in different ways and handle things in different ways. I just need to know."
Number 3.
Alice Louise Lee, June 3, 1953, August 29, 1960, was just 7 years old when she was murdered. Physical evidence was not properly stored. It could make it impossible to use modern DNA analysis to help solve her case. Alice Louise Lee disappeared around 10 a.m. on August 29, 1960 from the bean field near Trent, Eugene, Oregon, where her parents worked. Her nude, partially buried body was found on September 16, 1960, relatively close to the bean field. Alice told her mom that she was going to put her doll with the family lunch box. She was never seen again. Authorities said that Alice was carried to the place where she was found. How did they know? A change in tracks and depth of footprints? 2 tracks suddenly becoming 1 deep track? At 7 years old, Alice may not have added a lot of weight to really deepen an adult man's track, unless the soil was really soft. The average weight of a 7-year-old is between 40 to 60 pounds. Searchers later found her dolls and all clothes in an area where pickers kept their lunches. Several women, including Alice's late mother, later recalled hearing a brief, sharp scream about 11 a.m. All chalked it up to horseplay among teen pickers. It took 2 searches before Alice was found. Then Deputy Sheriff Wayne Dillon, assigned to the case after earlier searches failed, found Alice's body about 980 feet from where bloodhounds lost her trace earlier. R.W. Swan, the owner of the bean field, notified Dillon of a strange odor. Dillon searched the area. He said he saw what looked like a blood-stained stick about 20 feet from the girl's body. See article here. Was that stick preserved? Could he also see from a distance that a body was buried there? The case is hindered by an investigation that may have missed many angles. In this article, you can read how frustrating it was for detectives. Alice was found face down, either with or without clothes wrapped around her neck. This article said her corduroy jacket was wrapped tightly around her neck. Corduroy is a thick fabric, so strangulation with that jacket required strength. It seems to rule out very young boys. The men had found the dead child face down and partially buried in a hand-dug grave. Her clothes were piled beside her. This article states the clothes were stacked beside her. Did that include her jacket? This article confuses me. If it is true, why did the bloodhounds not find that stack? Were all her clothes found? Were all these pieces of clothing preserved so we can test them with the MVAC? Even if not properly preserved, they should still be reviewed with modern eyes to see if we missed anything, any trace, any mud, imprints, stains, soil, etc. Of course, finding this child nude means we fear sexual assault. I assume that the autopsy would have given us more information. However, I have not read anything about an autopsy report in the public domain. The Lane County Sheriff's Office stated at the time that the cause of death would be made known after the autopsy. So was it strangulation or not? If strangulation, was it by an object, clothes, rope, etc., or manual? If the clothes are preserved, can we try to examine them with the MVAC? If manual, can we say anything about the attacker being left or right-handed? Was she found by then Deputy Sheriff Wayne Dillon, who went looking in the area where Swan said he smelled a strange odor, or was Alice's nude, strangled body found after someone, not sure who, noticed buzzards circling around a shallow, hand-dug grave as posted here? Another article states that Lane County Deputy Sheriff Wayne Dillon and bean yard owner R.I. Swan, alerted by circling buzzards, found Alice's nude, strangled body. But this article doesn't mention a blood-stained stick. It all comes down to the bloodhounds. I am pretty sure they'd have found a stack of clothes and or a blood-stained stick. I hope pictures were taken from that hand-dug grave. It might tell us if the digger was a man or a woman, size of the hand, and maybe we can see a preference for the right or the left hand. Police thought it might have been a younger field worker, a local, not a stranger, who Alice knew, and that the killer was teasing and tussling with the girl, that she screamed when his touching turned sexual, and that he strangled her and panicked. However, in this article the detective is leaning to an older person. There is not much about Alice online. Author Wesley Murphy grew up in Dexter. His book A Homeless Man's Burden, She Was Only 9 is based on Alice's case. Murphy said that his dad was the Swans mail carrier for 25 years. My siblings and I picked beans at Swans for many years. My oldest sister was the same age as Alice, though she wasn't picking beans at Swans when Alice died. I did find a piece about Donald Ory Northey, who was questioned but released. He was cleared after taking a lie detector test. I took a screenshot of that site. Articles came and go on the web, so I am taking more screenshots now to show you what I saw. But aside from this, Alice hardly has a web presence. Anyone with information about this case, please call the Oregon State Police at 503-934-0163. Rest in peace, Alice Louise Lee.
Number 4.
Nikki Benedict was last seen walking home from a friend's house on May 1, 1967. 54 years later, we still don't know who stabbed her and left her to die in a field. Benedict's family and San Diego County crime stoppers are asking the public to help solve this cold case. Benedict, 14, was stabbed in the neck and chest when she was found on a dirt trail, according to the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. The area was near Carriage Road and Poe Road, long before the area was developed and homes were built. Benedict left her friend's home sometime before 6:15 p.m. to walk more than a mile to her house through fields and undeveloped land. An 11-year-old boy discovered Benedict lying on the path, critically injured, and ran to tell his father, who owned a market nearby. Deputies and emergency crews responded to the scene. They believe the girl was attacked between 6:15 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. Benedict was taken to Palomar Medical Center, but she was pronounced dead upon arrival. According to investigators, the scene showed evidence of a struggle near the location where the teenager was found. A witness reporting seeing a white male running from the area, but it was from a considerable distance, and the description was broad, investigators said. Despite an extensive investigation, officials said detectives were never able to determine a motive for the killing or identify any viable suspects. Could it be a local? Yes, it could be. Could it be an outsider? Yes, it could be, said Detective Will Altenhoff with the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. We don't really have evidence to suggest one way or another. Altenhoff said Poe was small at the time of the killing, and investigators had contacted every teenager from the 8th to 12th grade. Detectives reopened Benedict's case in the 1990s and ran DNA tests. However, the tests turned up no answers. However, investigators said DNA is not what would solve this case. They're hoping to get a lead from someone in the community who may know something or may have heard something. The world seems to expect that we get over this kind of loss at some point. No, we don't, said Nikki's younger sister, Mary Anna Basila. Basila lives in Poe and has fond memories of her older 14-year-old sister, who taught her how to write her name. There were 6 daughters in the Benedict family. Only 3 sisters are still alive. Nikki's death tore her family apart, Basila said. It's not wrong to want to know what happened to Nikki after all of these years. To know who stole her future and ours forever, she said. A year doesn't go by where she isn't contacted by someone with a theory. I've just found that's a road to heartbreak, she said. Benedict's family has kept Nikki's memory alive through a memorial photo album on Facebook. Anyone with information on this cold case can contact the San Diego County Sheriff's Department's Homicide Unit at 858-974-2321. Anonymous tips can also be called into Crime Stoppers at 888-580-8477.
Number 5.
Kathleen Heisey came from a prominent family in Bakersfield, California. Her father had been a city councilman, and her family called the city home for 4 generations. Heisey had 2 children, a daughter, Lisa, and son, Tim. At 50 years old, she was the principal of Browning Road Elementary School, a few miles north in the town of McFarland. She was the mom everyone wanted to hang out with, Lisa told us. On June 29, 1998, Heisey spent the afternoon with friend Lynn Runyon, before returning home around 7 p.m., according to Bakersfield NBC affiliate KGET. She left a message for her daughter. That night at approximately 7:25 p.m. Lisa said her mother used to unwind after work by opening the doors to her back patio, which was backed up against an open field, to enjoy a drink and a cigarette. The following day, Heisey missed work. When she didn't show up that Wednesday, her co-workers asked Runyon to check in on her. She arrived at Heisey's home that afternoon to discover a horrific crime scene. She was stabbed numerous times, Bakersfield Police Department Detective Christina Absher told the DNA of murder. After Heisey was killed, the assailant dragged her body down the hallway to her bedroom and posed her in a sexually humiliating manner. She's found lying on her stomach in a bedroom, Absher said. She was possibly assaulted, or there were some objects used, that were inserted into orifices of her body during the assault. There were no signs of a break-in, and detectives believe the assailant may have snuck in through her unlocked back door. A shoe print found in the field behind her house was a match to ones found inside the home. A board in her back fence was broken, possibly by her killer as he fled. No one was ever been arrested for Heisey's murder, although Bakersfield PD has looked at several possible individuals over the past 2 decades. Cold case investigator Paul Holes believes the key to solving the case is determining whether this was an interpersonal crime or committed by a fantasy-driven predator. Although Holes considered 2 men in Heisey's life during his investigation, he ultimately concluded the crime was predatory in nature. At the time of her murder, Heisey was having an affair with a married man. Lisa Heisey said her mother had recently given him an ultimatum, and Lisa found a letter from the man pleading with her not to end their relationship. Former co-worker Carol Mahachko told the DNA of murder he had planned to take a stand that weekend. For the most part, however, Mahachko said the two got along well, and Holes did not think the man raised red flags in Heisey's death. One suspect interviewed by Bakersfield PD at the time of Heisey's death was co-worker Lloyd Wackley. Large and well-built, Wackley had a very bad temper, according to Mahachko. Wackley had a history of road rage incidents, according to KGET, and Mahachko claimed he was angry upon learning that Heisey intended to give him a bad work evaluation. She said to me, "I'm afraid he's going to come to my house and kill me," Mahachko told the DNA of murder. During the original investigation, Wackley gave authorities a DNA sample, and his home was searched, wife Debbie Wackley told KGET. He subsequently provided receipts, photographs, and statements from multiple corroborating witnesses that placed him miles away at the time of the murder, and no charges were ever brought against him. Another potential suspect in the Heisey murder is death row inmate and serial rapist Michael Charles Brown. In 2016, Brown was sentenced to death for the murder of Ruby Lee Jackson Merriweather, according to local newspaper The Bakersfield Californian. Merriweather had been raped and murdered in her Bakersfield home in 2000. She was stabbed 18 times, and her body had been positioned at the foot of her bed in a sexually humiliating display, according to KGET. Brown was arrested for committing a series of rapes in 2007 and 2008, sometimes sodomizing them with foreign objects, according to KGET. After providing a DNA sample to authorities, he was linked to the Merriweather murder. Holes said the Heisey and Merriweather murders show a significant overlap in offender behavior. He went into Ruby's house, stabbed her, and posed her body. There appears to have been post-mortem foreign object insertion in Ruby's case, Holes said. While no evidence currently links Brown to Heisey's murder, Holes believes he's suspect number 1. He's the prime suspect as far as I'm concerned. DNA testing is currently underway in the case.
Number 6.
Jahi moved to the Golden Hill area of San Diego, California on April 21, 2002. He lived with his mother, Tamika Jones, and stepfather, Tyree Dwayne Jones, in United States military housing in the 3400 block of Beach Street. Tamika was a sailor in the United States Navy at the time, and was deployed aboard the USS Rushmore, while Tyree looked after Jahi. The two apparently slept in the same bed, although the child had a bedwetting problem. Jahi previously resided with his maternal grandmother in Maryland. Tamika took him to California the day before her deployment. Photos of Tamika and Tyree are posted with this case summary. Jahi's biological father lived in Frederick, Maryland, and had recently been released from prison. He and Tamika had not maintained their relationship after she became pregnant, and he had never been part of Jahi's life. Tyre told authorities that he and Jahi visited Balboa Park in the Golden Hill area near 28th Street and Cedar Street on April 25, 2002. The playground is in the 2800 block of Beach Street. Tyre said that he left Jahi near the sandbox while he purchased a soda from a nearby vending machine. He stated that a woman and 2 children were near the area at the time. He claimed that Jahi had vanished by the time he returned. Jahi has never been heard from again. Tyre searched the park and also walked around the block looking for him for 15 to 20 minutes, then called 911 to report his disappearance at 2:30 p.m. An extensive search of the area produced no clues as to Jahi's whereabouts. Authorities announced that Tyre said he left his stepson unattended for approximately 15 minutes. Tyre denied the statement and claimed that Jahi was unchaperoned for less than that amount of time. Investigators released a sketch of the woman Tyre saw in the Balboa Park area on the day Jahi disappeared. The image is posted with this case summary. Authorities identified the individual several days later and said that she provided unspecified information concerning Jahi's case. The woman is not a suspect in the child's disappearance. Officials were reportedly unable to locate Jahi's fingerprints on the playground equipment or any witnesses who saw him in the park that day, although police were able to locate everyone who was at the park between noon and 3 p.m. This prompted speculation that the child never visited the area at all. In addition, the police were puzzled as to why Tyre would have taken Jahi to Balboa Park, a mile away from home, when there was a park right across the parking lot from their apartment complex. Authorities stated that the last confirmed sighting of Jahi took place on April 22, 2 days prior to his reported disappearance, when a neighbor saw him playing at the playground of their apartment complex. Tamika called Tyre from her ship at 11 a.m. on April 23 and asked to speak to Jahi. He only made a few noises and then said, "Bye." Tyre told her Jahi was watching a movie. He also told Tamika that Jahi had wet the bed the previous night, and he stated the boy had fallen off the bed and hit his head on the dresser, but claimed he only had a small bump, and the injury was no big deal. Multiple witnesses saw Tyre carry 1 or more large trash bags to the apartment complex dumpster on the morning of April 24. It's possible he made multiple trips. When police asked him about it, he denied having taken out the trash that day. Authorities do not know what was in the bags, because the contents of the dumpster were hauled away before Jahi was reported missing. Although no one except Tyre saw Jahi after April 23, witnesses did see Tyre alone on April 25. One person saw him walking on Cedar Street towards his apartment complex at noon. 3 others saw him going into the complex at 12:15 p.m. Tyre had claimed that during this time period, he was with Jahi inside their apartment, and he had no explanation for the discrepancy. Tyre also made numerous phone calls to various acquaintances, asking them for money. During times he told police he was having lunch with Jahi, napping with him, and walking to the park with him. 2 hours before he reported Jahi missing, Tyre left 2 phone messages for Tamika asking her to get in touch about an emergency. The last call he made was to an ex-girlfriend. He spoke to her for half an hour. 6 minutes later, he called 911 and said Jahi was missing. Both Tamika and Tyre kept daily diaries for each other to read, while they were apart from each other. Investigators read Tyre's diary, and stated some of the entries indicate Jahi was harmed before his disappearance was reported. In his entry for April 23, Tyre wrote, "Today for some reason Jahi hasn't been moving or really talking. Jahi is starting to act really funny. He won't get up off the floor. He's not walking or talking when I tell him to get his cup. He just looks at me. I know it's going to take some time. But I don't want him hating me for something I can't control. The bump on his head has gone down. I put ice on it. It's gotten a little red. In diary entries dated 10:30 a.m. on April 24th and 8:54 on April 25th, Tyre made no further references to any injury to Jahi or any unusual behavior on the child's part. Instead, he wrote about toilet training him, bathing him and taking him to the park. Tyre complained about frustration over financial matters. He was short of money, and, although Tamika had given him her debit card to use while she was deployed, he was having trouble using it and accessing the funds in her account. He also wrote that they were running out of food. However, when investigators checked their apartment, there was plenty of food. Jahi had been given a bag of cookies shortly before his disappearance, and none of them had been eaten. Tyre had a prior criminal history including drug charges and failure to pay child support in Maryland. He and Tamika allegedly took polygraph tests after Jahi disappeared. Numerous media outlets reported that Tyre failed the exams, but officials refused to confirm the allegations. Tamika and Tyre began working with a retired social worker to search for Jahi during the summer of 2002, and Jahi's father hired a private investigator to look for his son in September 2002. The private detective cited numerous inconsistencies in Tyre's version of events as reason for concern. Tamika and Tyre later moved back to Maryland and ended their relationship. In October 2004, Tyre was arrested for attempted murder, assault and other charges in connection with an incident that happened in Frederick, Maryland. No one was harmed in the incident. In January 2005, he was additionally charged with second-degree murder in the case of a Maryland man, John E. Poochie Hill, who was shot at a Maryland apartment complex in 2000. Tyre's trial was just about to begin when prosecutors dropped all the charges against him, as numerous witnesses were unavailable to testify. He later pleaded no contest to assault in another case, and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. In April 2016, Tyre was arrested in North Carolina and charged with murder and child abuse causing death and Jahi's disappearance. The arrest warrant quoted the writing from Tyre's diary that suggested Jahi was injured. A specialist in child abuse said the symptoms Tyre described in his diary are consistent with either a serious head injury or blunt force abdominal trauma, either of which could be fatal if left untreated. The child abuse expert also noted that Jahi had a bedwetting problem, and bedwetting can trigger child abuse in caregivers. Tyre had written in his diary, and also told Tamika, that Jahi wet the bed on the night of April 22, 23. One of Jahi's onesies and his blanket, which were found in the apartment, tested positive for the child's blood, and investigators found a pair of Jahi's pajamas in the trunk of Tyre's car that also had his blood on them. Tamika, when asked, said there was no reason for any of her son's clothes to be in Tyre's car. Investigators also found some of Jahi's and Tamika's clothing mixed together in a dumpster near the family's apartment. Tamika said she and Tyre had never talked about him throwing away any clothes. During Tyre's trial in February-March 2018, the judge dismissed the charge of child abuse resulting in death, noting the lack of substantial physical evidence. He maintained his innocence and testified in his own defense, saying he loved Jahi and would never hurt him, although he admitted to having left him alone for far longer than he initially claimed, and to having lied to the police about this. The jury was unable to reach a verdict, deadlocking at 10-2 for acquittal. A mistrial had to be declared. A judge decided that Tyre would not face the jury again for a second trial, stating the prosecution's case was weak, and there was no way a jury could find Tyre guilty based on the evidence available, and that it's unlikely any new witnesses will come forward at this point. The judge dismissed the murder charge against Tyre. Foul play is suspected in Jahi's case due to the circumstances involved.